Time is now 8 a.m., and we will begin with a roll call conducted by our board clerk, Zuki Ellis.
Director Broderick.
Here.
Director Vu.
Here.
Director Allen. Director Kopp. Here. Director Carrillo.
Here.
Director Ellis. Here. Director Foster.
Here. Next, I'd like to move to approve the order of the main agenda. Do I have a second?
Second, Broderick.
Thank you. That motion was seconded by Director Roderick. Vote, please.
Director Broderick.
Yes.
Director Vu.
Yes.
Director Allen. Director Kopp. Yes. Director Carrillo.
Yes.
Director Ellis. Yes. Director Foster.
Yes. Thank you. That motion was 6-0. Passes unanimously. Next is a resolution adopting a St. Paul Public Schools resolution requiring all staff either to be vaccinated against COVID-19 or just to submit to regularly scheduled COVID-19 testing. And I will turn it over to you, Superintendent Gothard.
Thank you very much, Chair Foster, members of the board, staff, and community. Great to be with you this morning, and I thank you for calling this special meeting, 8 a.m. on a Friday. Really appreciate it, and helping us get off to the very best start possible for our school year. Also joining me today is Director of Health and Wellness, Mary Langworthy, and Executive Director McCarty, Human Resources, who, of course, are doing a lot of great leadership with as it pertains to this revision, as well as other staff who are here to work with you today as well. You know, I think I'll just share very quickly before I begin going over some of the revisions that we were requested to make. Many of you have been out and about this week. Last night at Humboldt, where we had a ribbon cutting ceremony. Several of you have taken part in your own open houses for your children, or you've seen others taking place. You're seeing excitement on social media. You're seeing some excited emails of both excitement and worry, of course. But I think for me, and especially spending time in that community last night, it illustrated how wonderful it is that we can open our school years in person, and that children and families and staff are really excited about that. And you can see it and feel it. And though there are face masks on, because that's required in SPPS, there is every bit of energy that you would expect the opening of a school year to bring. And for that, I'm grateful. And really believe that the discussion that we're going to have and the vote that you are going to consider is one more tool that we can have in place to ensure that that continues. I've talked with colleagues both here in the metro and around the country who have already started school. The challenges are real, everyone, and I think we knew that coming in, but I've now heard examples of that. And I think we have to be both realistic in our approach and open and transparent and communicate, but we also have an obligation to do everything that we can to make sure that we are protecting our staff, students, and community in opening our doors. And therefore, I believe that the vote that you are about to consider is a very important part of that. So the other night, Tuesday, you asked us to come back to you with some revisions on the resolution. I'm not going to read the resolution in part or in full. You have a copy of that. You have a copy of the revised resolution. But I will take you through. Looks like we're getting up the PowerPoint, so I'll just pause for a moment and let that come up, and then I'll take you through some of the revisions that were made. First, I'll begin by just stating that COVID-19 vaccination is the most critical strategy to help schools safely resume full operations, and that is a front and center Centers for Disease Control, CDC, and Prevention quote that you'll find on just about any publication that they're putting out right now in terms of helping schools do this incredibly important work.
Through the chair, we're pulling up the slide presentation at this moment.
Thank you, Chief.
A little technical difficulty.
As they're finding the PowerPoint, I will just give a little time here. The first one is quite simple, and you'll see the list of them come up in just a minute. But we are going to require acknowledgement of the vaccination by October 15th or proof of weekly testing. That's a key distinction. We talked about that the other night. What is the reality of us being able to implement that? And we believe that we've worked together as a team to come up with a process by which we can have October 15th be that day. Great, thank you. Yep, there we are. So again, I went over the quote at the top and just went over the first bullet point here, requiring that by October 15th or proof of weekly testing. Applies to SPPS employees, contractors, vendors, and visitors. There were some questions around who counts as a visitor. If I'm a parent and I'm there to pick up my son or daughter from practice and going in, that's a little bit different than someone who has a regularly scheduled purpose in being in the school, maybe a volunteer who's there 2 or 3 days a week or there routinely. So we have to look at how we're going to differentiate between those two instances. Of course, we're not going to be able to regulate those who are coming to pick up a child. It could be a neighbor, aunt, cousin, somebody, a friend of the family as well. So we won't be able to get it to that point. But again, we're going to look to make sure that every safety precaution is in place in order to do that. And if that individual, no matter who, would come into the building, of course, they would have to wear a face mask. I think it's important to point that out. Employees report vaccination and testing through the process under development by HR. So we're working on this right now. The staff can take you through some of their initial thoughts on that. We're also going to note existing bargaining agreements apply to any potential disciplinary action for failure to comply. So we are going to follow that, of course. That is our contract and the work that we have to do. Some other notes that I want to bring up in just the overview is the option for weekly testing addresses medical, religious, and other reasons for vaccine hesitancy. Millions of people in the United States have received the COVID-19 vaccines under the most intense safety monitoring in U.S. history. We really believe this and believe in the reading that we've done and how safe it is and how effective it is. The reporting of overall vaccination status is aligned to the start of the academic quarter. So as it states in the resolution, as we bring these to you each quarter for review, we will be able to compile data, if by then, if not sooner, that shares with you the percentage of the individuals who have demonstrated vaccination status. Including contractors may have adverse impact on their ability to provide services, and this is a real concern. In fact, in the calls that I referenced earlier in this conversation, that is perhaps COVID-19 being the largest, but second to that and only by a sliver are the goods and services that individuals are able to supply and services they're able to provide to districts right now. And that's really in any workforce industry, as I've heard and learned as well. I'm talking to one of our contractors last night and him sharing with me the back order they have on supplies and, not even workforce. They don't have materials for the workforce to use. So it is a real concern in terms of some of the impacts that this could continue to have on us if we're able to continue to be a competitive employer. Is this a barrier or is this something that can help us do this safely and effectively? So we're going to have to watch that very carefully. And then the costs, administrative staffing and testing vaccination reporting tool. These are under development. I don't know that I have or the team has any hard numbers for you. Just know that it's a priority. In order for us to utilize the 3 years of American Rescue Plan dollars and other ESSER funds that we've received, we have to have our students in school and we have to educate them effectively. So this is a priority. And if costs are outside of the realm of what we currently have, either a contingency or the ability to move in order to make this a priority, we are committed to making those adjustments. We have to. We absolutely have to. Next slide, please. So these are some of the key revisions that we've made from our discussion on Tuesday night. The first is that the CDC and state of Minnesota quotes are footnoted, as was asked by the board. Vaccination reporting has been changed from proof of vaccination to acknowledgement, and I'll have the team share some of the differentiation and how we arrived at that. Paragraph 1B clarifies that the testing requirement applies to staff who remain unvaccinated or not fully vaccinated and or have not provided proof of full vaccination. So just to clarify.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Dr. Gothard. There's a little bit of a disconnect between the slide and what the actual resolution says. We've taken out across the board the proof of vaccination and have tried to be consistent with acknowledgement of vaccination throughout. And so, but when the slides were written and we made the additional revisions, there's a little bit of a time gap there. So I just wanted to clarify that for everybody. We're in that point, and then later on, we're talking about paragraph 6, and it says proof. It really, if you look at the resolution itself, it says acknowledgement.
Thank you for that, Chuck. And again, in bullet 2, it does say that it switches to acknowledgement, and that carries through just about every place in the resolution. I do apologize for that. Paragraph 2 revised to say that the board recommends the provisions regarding paid time off and sick time. Paragraph 5A includes the receipt of any subsequent booster doses and the definition of being fully vaccinated. And paragraph 6 clarifies the new hires need to provide acknowledgement as well and submit to weekly testing until fully vaccinated. So again, that carries through acknowledgement to proof. Now, I'll share just a couple of other points in the revisions that we made. And I'll again have the team share a little bit more about how we're going to do this. It will allow for us to proceed more quickly in setting up our internal system and maintain the start date of October 15th. And really, when we heard go live, we heard start date the other night, what that really pertains to is enforcing that weekly testing is going to be required beginning October 15th. So staff and all the partners mentioned in our resolution will have to demonstrate an acknowledgement of being fully vaccinated, or testing will begin on October 15th. So 2 different ways of looking at go live, either have it reported or submit to weekly testing. Paragraph 1V is revised to clarify that testing requirement applies to staff who remain unvaccinated or not fully vaccinated. So again, just a reminder about that. Paragraph 2 is revised to say that the board recommends the provisions regarding paid time off, sick time, and this is to alleviate union concerns that were expressed in their letter to you, SPFE's letter to you, that the parties will not be able to engage in the effects of bargaining because the district will be locked in on these issues. The revision changes proof to acknowledgement as well. We fully understand that this resolution may cause us to have to look at all of our labor contracts with all of our groups and make the appropriate adjustments. Again, we do not want this to be something that divides us. We want this to be a way that brings us together to safely bring our staff back and bring our communities back to our school buildings. So it's very important to all of us in this work. And then finally, being fully vaccinated or submit to weekly testing again until fully vaccinated. It's been revised to reflect that October 15th go live date, again in quotes, for us to begin testing. So just for you to think about what does that day really mean, and that's what we're looking at in terms of go live in our definition. So again, there's a lot. It took me about this much time to read the entire resolution on Tuesday night. We've highlighted the revisions. At this time, Chair Foster, I will ask you to share any questions, concerns that you and your fellow board members have. And again, staff is here and willing to work with you this morning to see how we can help support this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gothard. At this time, I'll open it up for questions, comments from board members. And when I see your red light on your mic, that tells me that you want to speak. Vice Chair Vu.
I still had questions around number 7, around on-site contractors, on-site vendors, on-site volunteers, St. Paul Public Schools, leasees, and the employees, agents, and contractors. I suppose I need sort of a situation to ground my understanding with number 7. Can someone provide me with maybe a hypothetical situation?
Vice Chair Vu, thank you. I'm going to look to Chief Turner to share with you the various individuals in those groups that she works with.
Good. Thank you, Superintendent. Good, Chair, Director Vu. So example might be, I think last time Director Coffin asked, what kind of number would that be? So in a typical year, we have about 297 bus drivers per day. 260 of them do not work for St. Paul Public Schools. They're a contractor. So they work for other companies. So that would be an example. Our bus drivers is a huge, I have a huge concern with our bus drivers. We're in a competitive market. You've seen the news articles about bus drivers and the shortage. So that's a huge concern of mine. We custodial. A number of our custodians are initially with a contractor, Androtech, and a significant number of our food service are initially with a contractor, also Androtech. So the children that are serving our food, driving our buses, and supporting our cafeterias, cleaning, are primarily contractors. Our after-school program are primarily ran by non-school district people. We contract with the Y, we contract with other nonprofits, city employees. So I asked my team to do just a rough estimate, and we counted about 1,500 people a day interact with our children and do not work for St. Paul Public Schools.
Thank you for that, Chief Turner. And just one more question about the October 15th launch date. What has changed between our meeting on Tuesday night and the reservation of launching this implementation of vaccination requirements in December or January versus October 15th?
Chief Baker.
Thanks. Through the chair, Vice Chair Vu, I think we heard from the last meeting on Tuesday a concern around trying to balance urgency and this importance with also trying to ensure that we have a solid implementation plan. And so what we tried to do is in this resolution and through conversations with staff, find that balance. So right now, this resolution tries to balance between what we heard from board members and also staff on saying that this is important, but also with an implementation plan. And that's why we see some of the distinctions between acknowledgement and with acknowledgement, with vaccinations and proof of testing.
I just want to ask further exactly how is that going to be accomplished with the October 15th launch date?
Through the chair, Vice Chair Vu, I definitely want to defer to Executive Director Kenyatta McCarty before I speak. So I'll turn it over to her.
Through the chair, Vice Chair Vu, what we're looking at right now, and we're working with one of our other departments on developing a database basically for the acknowledgement. There is a template that we're going to be using to base ours off of, and it will ask for staff to acknowledge their vaccination status and then to attest that the information that they're providing is accurate and true. We will also, throughout the year, perhaps request that staff provide documentation per their vaccination. So we'll run reports frequently, and also we'll audit those reports to make sure that we have that information. So the employees, as they're filling out that form, will understand why they're filling it out. Will understand that we may come back and ask for documentation, that they'll have so much time to produce that for us. And we'll also understand what the implications are if they're not able to provide that. But we do have a system that we're working through. It's tied to our HRMS system, which is PeopleSoft, that we'll be pulling the data from, and will allow us to get this information more efficiently, quicker with that October 15th date of existing staff.
All right, thank you, Executive Director McCarty. Thank you, Chief Baker. This is all I have for now.
Director Kayeda.
I have a question, and it's a follow-up to the question that Director Vu asked regarding about the request for documentation. Is the idea that you're going to cover 100% of employees, or is it more like a sample to kind of compare against the attestation data?
Through the chair, Director Carrillo, we will be doing a sample of employees from time throughout the course of the school year, for instance. So we may not hit every single, but we will be doing it quite regularly as a process. And that's part of some of the planning that we're looking at right now in terms of what's required in terms of resources to be able to do that.
Thank you.
Director Cobb.
Yeah, just a follow-up on the question about contractors. Who is responsible for tracking that? Will that be something that each individual contractor does and then reports? What does that dynamic and relationship look like?
To the chair, my understanding is that as contractors sign on with the district, they would have to sign on that they agree to our policies and procedures. So I'm concerned, not concerned about that part. I'm concerned that they won't bid on our business because of that, because it's just an additional step that they would need to go through as an employer to do the thing that we're doing. So they would have to account for the cost and the regularity of it.
Chief Counsel.
Yeah, Chair Foster, thank you. I wanted just to follow up on 2 points. Excuse me. With respect to that go live data, that start date on October 15th, because of that, there was one additional change that we made to the resolution in paragraph 1A. Initially, it said that staff needed to provide acknowledgement on or before October 15th. That was changed, the on or before was changed to say starting October 15th. So to reflect the fact that we need to put that process in place, because as written in the previous version, on or before meant, well, that could mean starting tomorrow, and we don't have that mechanism in place. So I just wanted to make that, it's a small change, but I wanted to make sure that you were aware of that change. And then just to follow up, Director Kopp, on your question and Chief Turner's response, that is pretty much standard in our vendor contracts, that our vendors are and contractors are required to follow school district policies, rules, regulations, et cetera. That's pretty much standard contract language for us.
And so there is, if I understand, there is just a concern about, is there a concern about potential workforce issues related to this?
Through the chair, yes. I'm extremely concerned with this.
And through the chair, Director Kopp, I would also, and I agree, and of course I support my colleague who is overseeing a lot of these 1,500 or so individuals daily. There's also a concern about COVID being spread uncontrollably through our community still and in our schools. So again, Chief Baker mentioned balance earlier. This is not perfect for many. I would hope that a lot of our employees, a lot of our employers who we do contract with already have a similar policy. I would hope that they do, moving around into various, work sites and things of that nature. And I hope that this can also be seen as a way that we can lead our community in fighting COVID, and that others will, because of this, form similar policies as well. So again, I think it's for us, for me, it is how do I keep these doors open every day, keep our children and families and staff safe.
Oh, absolutely, and I agree wholeheartedly. I think it's good to acknowledge that there could be, as a result of this transition, like potential. I think we have to kind of be able to see what's before us, and we're making decisions and trying to keep everything in balance. And so I appreciate the sentiment and agree with it. I did have a question about the booster language, and if someone can remind me, is there at the moment any kind of federal or state guidelines with boosters? And my wondering is, if there isn't something specific at the moment, would this be something that we would benefit from waiting for a review to amend at a later date? I'm just not up to the minute on what's going on with boosters.
Through the chair, Director Kopp. So guidelines have been changing a lot, and I'm trying to absorb everything in my brain right now to recall. But from what I recall, it's required, or not, a recommendation for those that are immunocompromised to get the booster, but I feel like the guidelines have continued to shift, and I'm not clear in my head right now on if that's a requirement or recommendation or not for all. The
only thing that I would add to that, Director Kopp, is that the date of 8 months past your second or first, depending on if you were Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, or Pfizer. 8 months is the recommendation for when to get a booster, but I have not received any hard guidelines yet for that. I want us to be ready, and I do want us to consider that as we've kind of laid the groundwork for that to be considered fully vaccinated as well. But how the timing and how the mechanism of that works, I think we're a little bit early. However, that would be very much appropriate for some of our follow-up as we bring this back to you in at least quarterly. That can certainly be something that we discuss in future iterations of this resolution for your consideration.
So as it stands in the resolution, there's no issue with there being, that we don't maybe have any hard and fast recommendations. It's still as written in the resolution. I guess we're good with it there, because I don't believe the booster language was in the original or what we considered on Tuesday. And so I'm only asking because I know we'll be coming back, and knowing how things change is just wondering if there's a benefit to not having that language in now, or if there is a benefit to having it now and not later. I'm kind of neutral on what it is, just trying to have the best possible and most precise language in this resolution.
So through the chair, Director Kopp, you bring up a good point. I will say that I think Council Long was telling us that at a minimum, you will be reviewing this quarterly. Of course, earlier than that, if need be. And so at that time, we could amend this language, we could change language. So I understand where you're coming from. I think that it's definitely up to the board on that. But if it comes up, you have the opportunity, if things change, guidelines change, that we can amend it. So it doesn't need to be in, or it could be in. It's up to the board.
Right. Thank you.
Director Broderick.
Thank you very much. I have two questions, one very specific, and I think this one I will address to General Counsel Long. We heard in Superintendent Gothard's original presentation, as he went over the PowerPoints, made the distinction between acknowledgement versus proof, and I'd like to get that just clarified a little bit for myself. And then you talked, General Counsel Long, about saying starting rather than on or before, and I'm still a little bit confused by the difference between acknowledgement versus proof, and then using the word starting rather than on or before.
Through the chair, Director Broderick, thank you for the questions. Happy to try and provide that clarification. So with regard to acknowledgement versus proof, the acknowledgement is really relying on the employee to verify or attest to having received the vaccination. We're going to take people at their word, as opposed to proof, which would be, I want to see your vaccination card. So we're not going to require people to copy, scan, present their actual vaccination card that you got when you got your shots. Rather, we're going to do a form where somebody will verify an affirmative statement that they have in fact been fully vaccinated. By analogy, and this is an example that Dr. Gothard has used in some of our meetings, if this maybe helps a little bit. Right now for our time cards, we go in on the computer, on the system, we enter in how many hours we work each day, and then there's a little box that we click on that says, I affirm or I acknowledge, whatever, that this time is accurate. And we submit that. We don't, a lot of us, we don't have a time card. We punch in and we punch out, and then we submit this time card as proof that we were here at 8 a.m. and we left at 4 p.m. and we worked our 8 hours. Rather, we're taking, again, people at their word by saying, an affirmative statement, I attest or I acknowledge that I have received the full vaccinations. Does that help?
And it certainly does, other than the fact that sort of begs the question, is acknowledgement versus proof, does it give this mandate the appropriate, excuse this expression, but do we have the appropriate teeth in the mandate then if we're only asking for acknowledgement rather than proof?
Director Broderick, I believe that it does. It's the same, as I said, with that time analogy. If somebody goes online and submits false, misleading, inaccurate information about the time that they worked, but they attested that it's accurate, and we determine later on that it isn't, we can take action. There's teeth behind that. Same thing here. If somebody affirmatively were to go in and say, I attest or I acknowledge, I should keep saying acknowledge, I acknowledge that I am fully vaccinated as defined by this, and we later determine that that person is not, then there's teeth behind it. There's corrective action that goes along with that.
Okay, thank you.
Director Broderick, if I could further add it for you, for your question, I think it does this also. It gives us two groups. So there will be a group who have acknowledged that they're vaccinated and a group who is not. So it allows us to focus on making sure that we can set up testing for that group who has not acknowledged.
Okay.
Through the chair, one last thing, Director Broderick, on that.
Yes.
Is also addition to, I think you said the teeth, is the audits that we do. So that allows, and that's for all groups. So that includes those that have, right? That includes those that have provided acknowledgement for vaccination and also proof for test so acknowledgement is for proof of acknowledgement for vaccinations. I'm trying to make sure I get this right. So the teeth, in addition to what General Counsel Long has said, will be also through our audits.
Okay, well, thank you very much, because now I've heard from the General Counsel and from the Superintendent and the Chief of Staff, and I can be assured then that from a legal point of view and the fact that Superintendent Gothard and our entire staff, I might say, will be responsible for the implementation. What you're assuring me is that from a legal point of view and from an implementation point of view, that using acknowledgement will work just as well as using proof. And I saw Superintendent Gothard nodding, and thank you. Now, my second specific question was about the starting versus honor before. Oh, I'm sorry.
Council Long has a follow-up for you on that one.
Oh, sure.
Well, no, I was going to address your second question.
I thought I had forced you to spend so much time on the first one that you may have forgotten what the second one was. And you're right. Thank you for remembering, Councilor Long. Starting versus honor before.
This time I do remember the second question. The question on switching the language in paragraph 1A from on or before October 15th to starting October 15th. And the reason for that change is, again, we're talking about having an acknowledgement for employees to go in and acknowledge the receipt of the vaccine. We don't have that system set up yet. We need to develop that. What that form looks like, where it lies in our system, how that will be done, how that will be tracked. And so part of this is the time to put those processes and procedures in place. And the way it was written in its former language, it said on or before October 15th. So that would suggest that if I'm someone who is fully vaccinated and next Thursday I want to acknowledge that I'm fully vaccinated, we don't have the mechanism yet set up to do that. So then that leaves kind of this limbo period where we're saying on or before October 15th, you're supposed to do this, but we don't have the mechanism in place yet in order for you to do it.
Okay, I see. Thank you very much. In fact, that is a perfect segue, as they say, to my second question, which is more of a general question and sort of a remark on my part. As I thought about this meeting this morning, last night I was thinking, obviously we were all thinking about it. And it seems to me that, I'm personalizing this in a sense as a board member, but it seems to me that as a individual board member and as a board, at this morning's meeting, we have a very important decision to make in terms of voting for this resolution to mandate vaccinations. And of course, as you all know, I'm ready to vote for that resolution. But then my second thought was that as we come out of this meeting, we as board members, and I think some of it's been already answered partly by Chief of Staff Baker and of course by Superintendent Gothard and actually by our General Counsel also. I think our obligation is that we are assured, even before we vote, that the implementation of this mandate is going to be able to be successfully carried out by our staff, which is going to be a big task for them to do, and they may need assistance from outside consultants or resources. But can we talk just a little bit generally about this board being assured that the implementation of this mandate that I am absolutely for can be done by either by our current staff, our on-board staff in-house, and or help from somebody else, because it does seem like, particularly in the case of the outside contractors and people that come in as volunteers and this sort of thing, that there may be a lot of work that's going to have to be done in order to truly implement this mandate. And you know me, I'm the master of cliches, but I'll use one again. The devil will be in the details as we implement this mandate, which I will say for the third time that I hope that we pass today. So Dr. Gothard or anyone else, help me on this.
Sure, Chair Foster, members of the board, and Director Broderick. I'll begin, and then I'll pass it to Director Langworthy to share as well some information. This is really about accountability. We have had now access to vaccines since January of 2021, or on or about. I don't remember that exact date. They're all blending together. And that's for just about everyone. And of course, by then, school staff, all in that group came together since that time. Every group, including our contractors and everybody mentioned kind of in that general group, also eligible for vaccines if they choose. Additionally, testing has been widely developed and accessible as well. Just this week, they reopened the Wilkins Arena, I know, for testing, for example. So those tools have been there, but for us, this is about accountability. This is about our safe learning plan and making sure that we can contain that plan within the words that we have written and shared with our community to be able to achieve it. So I do believe, Mary can share a little bit more about the mechanics of how that might look, how staff might access it. Executive Director McCarty maybe could go into a little bit more detail about our initial thinking about what that acknowledgement form could look like. It could be as simple as, a survey that you fill out and provide information on your phone. But I'll turn it over to my colleagues.
Thank you.
Through the chair, Director Broderick, I would like to just point out one clarification just before I go into a little more detail about the testing part. When we're looking at vaccination, we're talking about acknowledgement, and then the audits will occur with that. When we're talking about testing, we're talking about proof. So people will submit their test results. But then we will need to verify all of those. So it's not just the acknowledgement or an audit that will occur with the testing, it's verification of all of them. So just to be clear on the difference between the vaccine and testing. As far as the testing options, so, with all these guidelines, everything has shifted. We've had to develop a number of tools, resources, guidelines, procedures. And while it's been challenging, we've been able to meet a lot of really short deadlines, and I expect the same with this. It's hard. It's hard work considering the time of year it is, but I feel confident that we're able to move forward with the testing part. How I anticipate it looking from the testing perspective, and then I'll let Kenyatta speak to more the vaccine part. I see us offering testing weekly, let's say every Monday. Last year we offered it every other week. This year it would just shift to one time a week. We would offer that as one of many resources so that we're not the sole supply of testing for our employees that would be required to follow this. So if every Monday they have the opportunity to get tested at work, but we provide other resources in the community like Roy Wilkins as one option and other testing sites which are likely to open up again as case rates rise. I see those as many offerings and then having them submit those into the dedicated space that we've identified and that we verify, and this is a partnership between Human Resources and my department with our health expertise to be able to verify, are these valid tests, because there's a number of variety of tests out there and some are valid and some are not currently. And so being able to verify, are these accurate and they allowed tests, but being able to upfront identify to employees what is eligible for a test, what is not, so it's clear to employees as they move forward what should they be doing, what they should be using, and what's not allowable as part of that plan. So those are in the devil of the details, as you mentioned, that we'll still work through in the coming weeks as a team and collaboratively with Human Resources. And I'll turn it over to Executive Director McCarty.
Thank you very, very, very much.
And through the chair, Director Roderick, in terms of the vaccination acknowledgement, there is a system that we have access to, a software that we have access to, that would allow us to capture the acknowledgement form from every employee, as well as would allow us to run reports for the audit purpose, and then also allow us to gather information in terms of documentation to be uploaded. So we're working right now to develop that with our REA team right now. It's through that department that we have access to the document, or to the database, But employees would be required by the date that we determine to submit their vaccination acknowledgement. And then we would, after that date to be determined, we would then require the testing, the weekly testing, if they are attest to not being vaccinated, or they're unable to provide that information for us. Then that would be their option, is to do testing.
Thank you very much. Will we need to get some outside help to do all of this?
Through the chair, yes, we would need to get some support. As my colleague acknowledged, this is a very busy time of year for both of our teams, and so we are looking at that right now in terms of what that looks like. There is also a work team that is working on developing what that process will look like, and so we are combining our departments and our forces, I was going to say, to make sure that we're able to implement this.
Thank you very much. And as Dr. Gothard mentioned before, and I don't know if he used this word, but I'm sure he would agree to it, we are committed, if we pass this resolution, the reason we're doing this is because we are committed to the safety of our school district. And you also said that, we are actually also being held accountable in terms of any monies that we get from the federal government or the state to help us do this. So I guess I'm just asking this very simple question that the old proverbial fiscal watchdog always would ask, and that is, will we have these monies available so that we can actually truly implement this like I want to see it implemented?
Through the chair, Director Broderick, as of right now, from listening to the team, we're still costing out some things, so we don't have the specific number. But as of right now, we believe that the contingency or money that we have with ARP will be able to at least cover most of the costs. There's still some things again, so I want to say that we're still working out the details. But as of right now, we believe that we would have the funding to implement this.
Thank you very much, Chief of Staff, and of course, as I've said now, this will be the fourth time I've said it, how much I want this mandate to pass. But at the same time, as a school board member, I do have to exercise due diligence in terms of asking about what the cost may be. But I think this is one of those things that, by golly, like my mom would say, if the kids need it, we got to get it for them.
Other questions?
I did have oh, sorry. I don't know if you wanted to. No. Okay. Just a remark. From what I've been hearing in the conversation, there's a lot of conversation about, the mandate and, how the language has shifted from proof to acknowledgement. I just want to state that, with a mandate that requires proof immediately, there's also, I would consider, a detriment, which is we put pressure on our staff, and by staff I mean our bargaining units, whose members may be on the fence, to provide false proof, in which case we end up with the same situation as we ended up, where we're in with the acknowledgement. So I think as a net, we are actually writing a system that, or a mandate that involves trust. And just in general, I want to say that we, or at least I as a board member, feel that we need to empower a trust between our bargaining units and ourselves, especially in this situation. We cannot do this alone. We could mandate, put all the teeth, put all the bear traps and everything in there to make sure that everything was airtight. But if we do not have the support of our bargaining units and our staff, we will not succeed. And so I want to encourage us as staff and as board members to think of this as an action that we can take in unity to give our staff the opportunity to, utilize this tool, one tool and many other tools that we have to combat this pandemic. And I just wanted to ask Superintendent Gothard, any remarks around our connection with SPFE, other bargaining units? Where do they stand on this? What is the level of trust involved in adopting this resolution?
Chair Foster, Director Carrillo, I think all of this is new for us to think that we're in this position to draft a resolution for this kind of action. I think first and foremost, I want to have full direction from the board and your support behind any actions that we take. And there was some thought about, should we work out an agreement with 20 some odd groups and then the resolution? No, we have to have direction from the Board of Education, and then we have to look individually at every collective bargaining agreement and make sure that we can operate this within those contracts. So we're trying to reduce as much language as possible in this resolution so that we can act on it right away. And for those items that we do need clarification or agreement on, we're committed to doing that. And I know you would expect that from myself and my team as well.
Thank you.
Other questions? Any other questions? Director Allen?
What's up? So yeah, I did want to know, when will we know the cost of the system being put in place?
Through the chair, Director Allen, we have some estimates right now of potential staffing costs. But for a total cost, I think we will need just a few more weeks to ensure that we understand the amounts if a certain platform or database storage system is used. And we're right now still working out those potential costs. So we should know in the next few weeks more of a more dedicated, specific cost that we can provide you. But as of right now, what we probably have more ballpark amounts are is around the potential staffing costs.
Okay. And then, on number 2, where it talks about the paid time off for the day, the 2 hours, and then the next day, would they be required to use their sick time for that, or is that come out of another fund? Is my question.
Through the chair, Director Allen, I would defer to Executive Director McCarty on that one.
Through the chair, Director Allen, that would be something that we would have to work through in terms of what that looks like. For instance, right now in contracts, there's quarantine language, and that does not come from an individual's sick leave, it's actual quarantine pay. There's also bereavement leave. And so this might look something like that. And so we have still to determine what that looks like. So it may or may not.
Okay. I think that's it. Yeah, I think that's it. I'm good, Chair.
Director Gothard.
I have one. Thank you, Chair Foster.
Superintendent Gothard.
One follow-up on costs that I want to share with everyone as well. One of the other figures that's hard to come to is the cost benefit. And what I mean by that is that if we can create a healthy community, what costs may we alleviate because our staff can be here serving our students? We can prevent classrooms or individuals from being quarantined. So it's hard to put a number on that as well. And, so I just want to just to kind of look at the two differently. It's hard to put a cost on each, I think, but it is one that I really believe in, that there will be some benefit from this as well that could in fact mitigate those costs.
Any other questions? Director Ellis, sorry.
We're cousins. It's just too close. I just wanted to go back to Tuesday and some of the public comments and knowing that some people may be unable to take the vaccine. And I want to thank Chief Counsel for making very clear distinction and for the very clear distinction in the language of the resolution that we're not mandating the vaccine. If you are not able to get it, that testing is also the option. And I wanted to be really clear about that, given the concerns that we heard at public comment, whether that be health and whatever other reason that there may be, people may not be able to get this, and this should not have an impact on their job in this district with students. And so I appreciate that we're offering testing. My question would be to Mary Langworthy. I know that we talk about staff testing who may not have been vaccinated, but for staff who are working with students and other staff members in the building who may have acknowledgement of a vaccine, is there the opportunity for them to have the test weekly as well too, or monthly, or a testing option for staff who may still be in buildings and have acknowledgement?
Through the chair, Director Ellis, yes, we are looking at offering it to all employees, and part of Executive Director McCarty and my conversation, we don't want to spotlight people that are unvaccinated, and that would be a concern of mine, is if we only offered it to the unvaccinated employees, then you're putting the spotlight on them in the building level. And so being able to open it up as optional for all employees and required for the unvaccinated employees, I think is an important step. And working through the grant funding process that's available and the contracts that need to be set up in order to receive those test kits and make them available to all is part of that process and timeline that we're looking at.
I just want to say I have really struggled with the place that we are at right now, because I'm like, this is people's personal information, and it's just not my business to know. I'm not going to ask anybody whether they've been vaccinated or if they haven't been vaccinated, because it's just not my business to know. But I also don't want us to be perpetuating, you know, disparities in this district, because there are people who can and there are people who cannot. And it's, again, not our business to know, but here we are in this place making a decision. And so I don't want us, I'm hoping that we're not going to be hearing how, to your point, that there is going to be this distinction between who does and who doesn't, and harm that that's going to cause. Because while I agree with Director Carrillo, like, this is an opportunity for us to trust one another, that we're trying to do the best that we can to keep each other safe, that we're not causing harm in doing it. And so, I struggle that this is the decision that is on us to make. And I also, like, care very deeply for this community. This is the community that has raised me. I will be here until I die. And I want us to do the right thing, and the right thing doesn't feel like it's just in this piece of paper. It really is about us doing this together and looking out for one another. And I wish it was that simple, but it's been so politicized that it's just not. And I just want us to care for each other and be kind, and not be have and have nots in this. And so that is what I want to say. And I appreciate everybody's work. I know this is really hard. I know that everybody has a lot of good energy about coming back to school, but also underneath that is some anxiety about it as well too. And so I'm not a big fan of not having any idea about what the cost of this might be. And not that it's not important and that we shouldn't be focusing on money, but like, sustainability is what I'm worried about. Because we're not just talking about some students who aren't in school right now. We're talking about large groups of our students coming back to buildings and trying to staff more students in building, knowing we have some limitations in the workforce right now. And so I just really need us to be thoughtful about what we're spending, how we're going to be spending, and what the long-term costs are going to be, because that's going to be really important to how we sustain the things that we need to sustain. Because I imagine that this may be part of our district for a few years to come. So that's it.
Director Patrick? Yes, I must say this because hearing Director Correa and now my good friend Zuki Ellis, I think the word that came out of particularly Zuki's remarks and out of Director Carrillo is this idea of respect, and respect for one another, and respect for all of the people and all of our staff members. And so this old man wants to thank those two directors for pointing that out. I think that's what this is going to be part of this effort on our part. I hate to sound sentimental, but Zuki, respect. You could sing the song.
Any other comments?
I too want to just acknowledge that this is a really hard decision to make. It's one to make the decision for yourself, but then it's another thing to make a decision for other folks and community. But one thing that I do want to do, and I have since the beginning of this pandemic, is play the part of ending the pandemic as soon as possible and keeping as many people safe and alive and breathing and happy, because this is going to be it's been a long haul and it's not over yet. And so health is important. It's the primary thing that we should be addressing right now. Academics are important too, but health is extremely important. And so in saying that, I really do hope that our staff and everyone who has the opportunity to be vaccinated takes deep consideration into doing so for the broader good of our community. I do want there to be respect, though, just as Director Broderick was saying, for those who have other religious beliefs and understandings about medicine and how it works. I just spent a short time in Mexico and got some history on the Mayan uh, culture, and it's you think that it's so far removed from where we're at, but in reality, a lot of the things that folks practice are just natural, and it's the natural way. And so we have to respect that, and we have to respect everybody's situation. And so I hope that the system that we set up allows folks to be private with their information, allows folks to make decisions on their own and not be forced or pressured in certain buildings or atmospheres about doing one thing or the other. I just hope that we all continue to put forth our best effort with masks, sanitizer, and all of the tools that we have to be safe with one another. So.
And Director Vu, Vice Chair Vu.
Sure. I just want to share some of my thought process around this decision today. So yesterday I went to my son's open house. His mother and I walked him into his classroom. I spoke with his teacher while he and his mother looked through the list of all the people who's going to be in his class, because he wanted to make sure that his best friend was in his class with him. And to his relief, they will be together. And then I went on to speak with the assistant principal. I went on to speak with the principal. I even spoke with the school's PTO chair. I looked at their list to see how many parents they signed up to be in their PTO, maybe future board members. And in the midst of all this commotion, I paused for a moment and I noticed the buzz and the energy that was in the school. And I came back that evening and thought about the choice that I was going to make today. And I thought about the oath that I took before I took office. Thought about the awesome duty that I must ensure, the awesome duty that I must do to ensure that that buzz and that energy that I witnessed at open school is going to be carried forward into the school year and beyond. And I began to understand that education was at the center of that open house. It's the why that I am where I am today. But education also has a how. It has a cost. And unlike some who think that we stand on the shoulder of others to see further than the generations that have come before, my experience has told me that rather we walk through history's graveyard and remember those that we've lost. And I'm here today because Marty Chung died. She died of COVID-19 back in June 2020. And I would be the first in line to trade all that I have learned since then in her stead, all the colleagues that I've gained, if she could be back with her family. You know, as much as a spectacle that this decision to vaccinate, require vaccinations can become, it really is a no-brainer because I think the cost of not doing it is too high.
Thank you for that. Usually I try to sum up what I hear from you all, but some things just need to sit in a room. I hear the care for our community. I hear the concern from this board of being responsible. Responsibility involves action, involves planning, it involves revisiting. At this time, we're in a space and place where there are just so many unknowns. And what this does is, as everyone has said, is allows for one other tool. What we've learned is our kids and our staff want and need to be in our buildings. And so we have to provide a space and a place that is safe for them to navigate within. So this one tool with the many other things, masking, testing, hand washing, sanitizing, monitoring who's coming and going within our buildings to ensure that we are able to have a school year and that our kids will thrive and learn and have successful outcomes in this district. I don't know that some folks really realize the burden, particularly when we are forced to make decisions that oftentimes may impede on others' personal beliefs. As a board, we have to make a collective decision about the totality of things. And so today, I just want to thank each of you for the time, the deliberation, the communication with internally and as well as externally with all of our different community members. Yesterday being in a school and the energy and enthusiasm of seeing our kids happy, our staffs ready and excited about getting into those classrooms and helping to create continue the bright futures that we see in all our kids. And that's where we need to be. So I look forward to, as this board makes a decision on this, charging you, Dr. Gothard, and our team to work collaboratively with all our folks. And we continue to listen and learn and allow us to move forward in the midst of this storm. Any other questions? Any other questions? Any other questions? I would move to approve the resolution adopting a St. Paul Public Schools resolution requiring all staff either be vaccinated against COVID-19 or to submit to regularly scheduled COVID-19 testing. Do I have a second?
Second, Broderick.
Thank you. That motion was seconded by Director Broderick. Vote, please.
Director Broderick,
Yes.
Director Vu,
Yes.
Director Allen,
Yes.
Director Kopp,
Yes.
Director Carrillo,
Yes.
Director Ellis, yes. Director Foster,
Yes.
that vote passes unanimously, Chair.
Thank you. With a unanimous vote. The time is now 9:07, and I would move that we adjourn. Is there a second? Thank you. That was seconded by Director Ellis. Vote, please.
Director Broderick,
Yes.
Director Vu,
Yes.
Director Allen,
Yes.
Director Kopp,
Yes.
Director Carrillo,
Yes.
Director Ellis, yes. Director Foster,
Yes.
that vote passes unanimously, Chair.
With a unanimous vote, as a reminder, there's also a committee of the board meeting scheduled for Tuesday, September 14th, 2020.